evening.
Great. Okay. So that moves us on to item 9, and I'm going to turn the floor over to Associate Superintendent Morgan Kyle to introduce the teacher coordinators and their presentation.
So it's my pleasure to welcome and say thank you to Erin Pickering, our teacher coordinator of mentorship and professional development, and Shannon Hagan, who is our teacher coordinator of educational technology. And as support, trying to, not be noticed, is Jeff Lanteo, who is a district coordinator of student options and opportunities. And we've talked a lot about coordinators that you as trustees had approved and encouraged us to do in terms of meeting the strategic plan. And so we have 11 folks that have been hired, 2 in the Indigenous department, and the rest from the other areas of the district. And they've been working deeply and enthusiastically in getting to school. So we're really pleased and appreciative that you're here today to let trustees know what it is that you've all been doing.
We're going to take our mask off. Erin and I have been working closely together, and I think we're far enough away from you guys. Give me 1 second.
This better work.
Hey, you know what? That's the best learning when I can demonstrate, even as the tech person who does all this, when something doesn't work, people are like, phew, it's not just always us. So, like Morgan said, I'm Shannon, and this is Erin. And no, I always get the question, am I related to Daryl? No, I'm not related to Daryl. We are 2 and 3 of 11. I think, if I can speak for all of us, I'm pretty excited people to be in the position that we are at. We are coordinators, and what's really cool about that is we really, truly work well together. Like every day we think, oh, I'm so glad we went out for dinner. It's like, I'm so glad we're working together. So Erin and I are going to take team. Like we'll go back and forth, see if you guys can keep up with us. So what we're going to cover today, we know that we have 10 minutes. You guys have long meetings. We're going to keep it nice and short. We're going to introduce you to our coordinators, tell you a little bit about how we are learning together to make it better for everybody else, how we are actually going out there and supporting and serving our district, and where we are going to next.
So we were pretty fortunate to have an interview with Campbell River Mirror, and this picture is from there, and that is the group of us. We cover specialties from technology to English language learners, French and French immersion, elementary and adolescent literacy, mentorship and professional development, ensuring student opportunities, covering healthy schools and wellness, and Indigenous cultural and cultural resources. So we have a gamut of wonderful professionals who are collaborating and coordinating together to ensure that we're serving and supporting all district educational staff.
So why did you guys hire us, right? Like, what's the point of us? So we came together a week before school actually started. We said, what is our mission statement? What do we actually want to do? You guys know the priority, right? The strategic plan, because I'm pretty sure you guys were involved with creating that. So our goal is to serve and support those SD72 educators to make sure that that strategic plan is a success. We are hoping that we'll have a job for minimum 3 years so that we can see it through fruition to 2023, but that's basically what our goal is.
We'd like you to pay attention to some of the headings and the few captive words that our educators and coordinators have provided to us for this slideshow. We have a wonderful dynamic team made up of members of our district as well as members from out of the district who are new here and are learning just how fabulous it is to live, play, and work on these lands.
So remember those because you guys are going to get a test. Yeah. So in order for us to serve better, one of the things that we've decided and been asked to do is make sure that we are learning together. So we have made a commitment. We meet 4 Thursdays a month, and every second Thursday we have made the commitment, but that's going to be our our training day, our own education day, where one of us steps up and we lead or facilitates that Thursday on whatever content that we think is important. Our last Thursday was assessment. Tomorrow we're going to talk about presenting to SFU as what our role as coordinators for our community is going to be. We are committed to doing a book club. Now, most book clubs are monthly, but ours aren't going to be, I'm telling you that right now. So we choose a book club, we read it, and we discuss it. Our book this month is Consoling Our Schools, sorry. We are curating ourselves and being provided with a collection of a repository of professional material so that we make sure that we are aligned with professional vision and values, so that when we go out to the school, we have common language. We are delivering the same message to every single facility that we go at. We're not creating any confusion. And lastly, like, we're collaborators, so we're coordinators. We find a problem and we solve a problem together as small groups.
Along with learning together is working and communicating together. We recognize the importance of maintaining an opportunities for constant communication, because a lot of the solutions we find are in those informal conversations that used to take place in hallways for many of us, and now they take place in our coordinator room, as well as on our coordinators teams, where we are interacting, live chatting, sharing resources, and ensuring that we're there to support each other with any of the problems and to build solutions together so that we can best serve and support all educators in our district. This happens on a regular basis, and it's become natural. Just 5 weeks in, we are tapping each other on the shoulder. We're eavesdropping on one another's conversations to add, ooh, have you considered this? And it's a really dynamic and special place to work.
We are working together. Part of our whole, our name is called coordinator. So one of our main jobs is that we actually do coordinate together in our different roles.
So some of the things that we've been working on is how can we collaborate to ensure that we're not only supporting teachers, but entire school communities. Things like looking at some of our outlying schools to ensure that they are engaging as deeply as possible in the ways that they need with our district. That means developing a framework for what does becoming a member of the School District 72 team look like, and how can we support you from the beginning of your journey with our district, as well as creating that common language that Shannon mentioned earlier, as well as aligned assessment practices that we can build upon and use the data and information to move our students and our teachers forward with all learning. Finally, one of our greatest goals is we've had opportunities and options to have students working in the community at a high school level, and we're expanding that to include our middle schools and our elementary schools. So what options and opportunities for engaging and experiential learning are available to all students in School District 72?
And we recognize, especially during this time period, how important it is that we support not only our students, but parents at home and teachers that are out in that community teaching every single day. We have a really talented, is so excited. We have a really talented person there that she is keeping our district librarian busy buying new resources all the time, and not just buying resources for Indigenous curriculum, but developing methods of truly incorporating it into pedagogy. It's not taught in isolation on the side of the desk. It's really, truly blending it together with every imaginable subject out there. A big one, which is, my job for sure, is developing those web resources and places that are accessible for anyone, anytime. So a big one right now, and we see a huge need, is resources for students and parents at home. Those, Morgan said to us the other day, eBlend is our third biggest school now. And so who do we need to support? We need to make sure that those students and parents, especially at home, have those resources that they are able to deliver the curriculum with their students at home. And lastly, but not least, the best. I mean, this is us as teachers, what we love to do is make those connections. We are out. There's 11 of us in every single school. We're going to show you a graph how often we're out there. We see what's going on out there, and we can take everything that's out there and say, look at what they're doing at this school over here. Wouldn't it be great if we can now share that over here? But it used to be that silo effect, not anymore.
So this graph represents our coordinators' work in schools. Down the side, there's a list and it has a number of the amount of time we've been spending or the number of visits. And this represents all 11 of us. And I think the piece that really stands out to me is that we have hit every school a number of times. And our plans continue to be that. We have coordinators that have weekly set up sessions to return to the same schools over and over. Their teachers and schools are reaching out to us via our teams and via our emails so that we can make appointments. But this is just only in the last 5 weeks. So we've got ranges all the way up to at least 5 school visits, and that could mean multiple coordinators attending those schools together, separately, and working to ensure that we're coming back and saying, here's how we can support those learners and those teachers to the very best. And this captures a snapshot of some of the things that we're doing in graphics. So we have coordinators leading, facilitating, and modeling strong strategies in the classroom. We have nested circles of how we overlap and how we work together and to support one another. We have our blogs, our newsletters, and our websites that we're developing. We have online meetings with a variety of stakeholders around the educational table. And of course, we have an opportunity for teachers to provide feedback in what are their needs and how can we best support them throughout the district through conversations and opportunities to meet.
And this has only been 5 weeks. So what have we done so far? So here's your test. So those 3 slides that we showed you of what our individual visions are, and we said read through them and kind of look at the commonality. So these things right here, these are the main words, those action words that we've pulled out, because we know that in order to be successful, we have a little bit of groundwork to do. And what's that groundwork? We need to do things like build, we need to enable, present, identify, create some wellness, harness, I love that word, plant seeds. So we know that we need to do those things before we can ultimately have informed learning opportunities.
And this is not a straight line. This is a messy journey that continues to spiral back. When we scan and observe what our colleagues need, we are thoughtful and reflective on that, and we move forward with intention to help harness the energy of our team and of our colleagues around the district so that when we get to point B, it'll be a large celebration, but we know that this isn't a straight road, and this is a journey that we are excited about, because change takes time in education, and we're excited to be a part of that.
So there's all our contact lists. You guys can take a picture of it if you want. It's actually on the website if you want. But I know we've seen a couple of faces. You guys pop in, say hi to us. Sometimes our room is empty because really we are out in the community. Sometimes people walk in and say, where are those district coordinators? Are they even working? But we're out in the community and in the schools. But anytime that you guys want to pop in and see what we're doing, come and see us. Come and see us in the schools. We'd love for you to see even already some of the really exciting things that we're talking about, not quite doing, we're almost there. Yeah, almost there. What we're almost doing. And we just want to say thank you for allowing us to have this time, because I know there's been a lot of talk about what are those teacher coordinators doing. And we're just, thankful that we can see the start of it. So maybe in 3 months we'll come back and tell you our next step and say, yeah, I think we did a good job hiring those guys.
We feel really grateful for the time and the commitment to allowing us to explore what the needs are in our district before we jump into action. A good foundation includes being an observer and a listener first, so that we can attend to what our colleagues need without making assumptions.
So thank you.
Are there any questions?
Oh yeah, questions.
Carol Hagan?
Yes, I was wondering how you were going to integrate professional development as well.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Thank you. I appreciate that question. The professional development hat is what I'm wearing right now, and I'm working to develop an opportunity for staff, Prody reps to meet with me and tell me what are their schools thinking of as their plans this year, and how can we ensure that that schools know what each other are doing. So who are their comrades in particular actions, as well as creating opportunities on our various professional development days to have colleagues come together. Professional development is very much about collaboration, and something I really hope for our whole district is that we begin to bring to the surface the good work that is happening and share that throughout the district, because often, as Shannon mentioned, great things are happening in schools. So how do we ensure that all educators are aware of those things? This Friday's Prody Day is a provincial day. It's amazing. In just the short span, all conferences have come online, making them even more accessible to people here in Campbell River because the cost has come down significantly. So we have some in-district offerings, we have lots of provincial opportunities, and we had the 2 days that were at the beginning of the calendar in September that we changed to administration, understanding that there was work to getting back to school, have been reallocated into our calendar to best suit the learnings of the K-8 structure as well as a high school structure. And we're really looking forward to our Indigenous Focus Day, which will happen in February, as well as balancing a district day, a school-based day, and time for colleagues to get together, speak about their kids, and make plans that really encourage experiential and engaging learning that will last these students their lifetime.
Right, yeah.
Just as a question, you speak about accessing community resources, and so what is your plan for kind of grabbing a summary or a snapshot of resources that support parents and education that already exist in the community?
That falls under a number of different roles, and right now we have our Healthy Schools coordinator has a number of contacts throughout the communities, and so we are working to develop a list of our experts and who are our go-to folks in the community, and each coordinator has essentially been able to connect with some folks, and that's a building and a learning piece for us, is to know what is available to us and our schools, and how can we ensure that our schools are using those resources. So if there's something that you're thinking of, we would really love to hear maybe what those connections are, because we are very much in a learning state for that right now.
And I know our Evelyn teachers, there's always at least one of us online when they have their meetings, so that we can kind of solicit what their needs are. Like, we just had a meeting with our literacy coordinator today saying, like, we need to go out and me as the technology person and her as the literacy person and say, what are your needs? Because we're already hearing it, and we can already see the connections that they're making in different areas of the community already.
Can I just follow up on that?
And John?
Just as a quick follow-up, I feel there's a deep value in making those community connections. I know that as community groups, they sometimes feel like the school district is siloed and really want to provide supports to help families and students and educators create a great environment for all of our kids.
Yeah, and that one picture that we showed you with that Zoom meeting, that was our healthy coordinators with 26 people, Morgan, 26 people. All different members of the community. I mean, yes, it was our siloed school board, but it was definitely other members within that community and reaching out. And he has good connections in there so far. Absolutely, yes, for sure.
Okay, John, then Joyce?
I know you've only got 5 weeks under your belt so far, but when we put the strategic plan together, we had ways of measuring our success. Have you been able to determine yet what your measurements of success will be, and when you report back to senior management or the board, will you be able to have the criteria for your success and how well you met them?
Maybe I can help with that.
Okay.
is that the focus at this point has been making those connections in the school, making sure that they are getting known in each of the schools. Depending on which one of the coordinator areas there's some easier measurables than others. So for instance, literacy is getting a benchmark from each of the elementary schools so that we've got one common assessment across the district and looking at where are kids now. That'll inform some of the practice, but right now we need to find out where we need to actually target with each of the coordinators to find out which data we can actually pull. Some is measurable, some is qualitative, some is quantitative. So at this point, we aren't there as to what are we measuring other than the literacy piece, the graduation pieces for the students' options and opportunities. So we're going to be looking at each one of them is what are the measurables? How are we able to, other than anecdotal, say that there has been progress here?
Followed by John, then Joyce, then Daryl.
I guess my question then will be, are you going to have any indication, say by June, that you have made a difference, or a year from June that you have made a difference?
Absolutely.
So
yes,
you will determine then what your outcomes are, and then you'll be able to measure them and report back saying we have been successful or not.
Absolutely. So we've got the strategic plan. That's where we're wanting to go. So we know where we want to be and how we're going to get there and which pieces we're going to be able to measure to respond to the work, the formative piece that'll inform the work, as well as this is working, right? And how much is it working? And the tough piece, I think, being this year, we have 500 kids that aren't in schools, and so we've been looking at how, even in literacy, can we get to those kids that are at home to assess them so that we have this broad, and expansive group that's been measured.
Joyce?
Yes, over the years of being on the board, I've had a number of exposures to pedagogies outside of our country that really inspired me in terms of their focus on collaboration and kind of growing the energy of the teachers as being the core to transmission of learning and enthusiasm around learning. So I see that happening within your coordinator group. But I'm just wondering, how do you extend that out to every teacher we have in our district? How can we take the energy of that kind of collaborative enthusiasm for exploration and experimentation and adventure and what have you, and get it out there?
So I know one of the things for me as a tech person, and I know when we talk about, even with our literacy, I just met with our literacy coordinators, one of the things that we talk about is building capacity, right? Like, I mean, you can have that one expert at each individual school, but if that expert leaves, then what happens to that school? So one of our really big focuses is building that capacity and then sharing it out. So when our literacy coordinators go into the schools, they're not just always going into the same classroom, they're making sure that they're going into all classrooms. As our mentorship and Pro-D coordinator, we're making sure, like, the teachers have to fill out a form now so that Erin can see, well, if this teacher at this school has requested to do this Pro-D, and same with this teacher, she is now connecting those two teachers together so that, I always say the shampoo commercial, and these guys always laugh at me, and I think, I'm looking at probably ages here, that shampoo commercial, and you tell two people and then so on and so, well, that's what we're trying to do. And so we're not developing the single expert, we're building capacity. And that's really what our goal is, that's what we talk about every single time that we have our meeting.
And if I may add, it's a sense of ripples. So we start with our early adopters and those people that are really passionate. And as you said, we build on that energy, and it's by sharing knowledge of what's happening and allowing ways to get involved. And so for me, as mentorship and professional development, I hope I see a ripple effect where our mentees feel good with the opportunities they've had and they become our mentors, and we continue to have a ripple out effect where, as Shannon said, we're building capacity in schools, And it's not on the shoulders of one or two people who know what they're doing, but that everyone feels safe and comfortable enough to be vulnerable and to be learners together so that we can move our practices forward. So in my role, I'm looking at what are the trends, what are the different areas of professional development that we are seeing as needs. And as you mentioned, not just here in our district, but I've had the opportunity to connect with Teacher Mentors of British Columbia, which is a group out of the Lower Mainland. And just last week, we were in a call to say, what's working so far? This is a strange year of bringing people together. So how are we encouraging interactions either in small groups or, I mean, some of these districts have more staff in their mentorship program than we might have in an entire school. And so I feel very fortunate to have started to connect with those people that are in other districts. And I believe the same to be true for most of our coordinators is that's a part of our learning is who are our fellow members, who are our people to lean on and to look at for interesting practices that we can then tailor to ensure that they work here in Campbell River.
And there's a phrase within here, and I just love it, is the empowerment of teachers. And I think it's goal number 2, that empowerment of teachers. And we need to empower them. That's what we want to do.
Meeting with them where they are so that they can engage and grow alongside each other.
Thank you.
Daryl?
Yes, I'm just so excited about having you folks on board. I can't describe it. 29 years on the board, and I have been hoping that this is the direction that we would finally end up at. There's so much energy. Every time I go by your office there people are working all over the place, dedicated. You cannot pay people to be this excited. They are just excited about what can happen in our district. This is in the middle of COVID. This is in the middle of chaos. And we have this lightning rod going through our district of how can we make things better for kids in this district. And that's happening. And I have seen the ripples, and I have heard people talking. And as you know, I drop into the board office all the time because for me, this is the most exciting time that I've seen in our board office in this whole time. We have a great board. We have some very strong minds in this board, but we have a leadership team in the board office that's taking us to where we want to be. And that includes the money, the education, and the skill level to meet all of those needs. I'm just thrilled to be on the board. I'm humbled by the fact that we're actually getting to where we want to be. And it wouldn't happen in any other conditions because you can make great strides and changes when there is a bit of chaos out there. People are looking for solutions while we're finding them in our district. We're finding solutions that we never even thought of before. So thank you so much. I'm excited about this, and yes, that's all I've got to say. This is just fantastic.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. You guys need this one?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, so that we get to see Shannon.
Okay, sorry guys, I'll stop sharing.
Yes.
We can continue.
Okay.
Shannon, can you still hear us? Yes.
She says yes.
Oh, you too, okay.
Good.
Just need to unmute.
Okay, we'll move on now to a resolution regarding banking in Ontario.
Yeah. So this is a new requirement from our bank. They're just looking for a resolution from the board establishing that they are our bank. We do have an agreement, and we've had agreements with them in place, but they're just looking for this extra step. If the board approves this, we'll we'll have the chair, vice chair sign it and authorize it. And I'm just looking for the resolution, banking resolution. Motion will be that the chairperson and vice chairperson, together with the secretary treasurer, that is, the chairperson and vice chair.
Do
I'm
we
just
need to hold
noticing
this
that the
till after
motion is
the
slightly
next?
different than what it is that was required. We just, the motion will be that the board pass a resolution appointing Royal Bank as the board's bank.
Thank you. Joyce?
I think that motion probably would stand. I was just worried about the signatures of Richard Franklin, chair, and John Kerr, vice chair, if this is your last meeting. But
Once there's a new chair, there will be new
Yeah.
people sign.
Yeah.
So that'll be fine. All right, Joyce, I would entertain a mover to that motion. Joyce McMahon, seconded. Daryl Hagan. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. The motion is carried. Okay. You saw the housekeeping motions regarding governance. This was basically to move our election of chair and vice chair to the next meeting. I would entertain a motion to make that happen. Daryl Hagan moved, seconded John Kerr. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Say nay. Motion is carried. Now we're going to move on to a report to the board on the costs belonging to the DCST.
Yeah, so we've been included in your agenda package, and we chose years 2016 to 2019 because this past year, 2019-2020, wasn't really reflective of a full actual year. So the costs are identified in your package. We included costs such as the annual membership, both Vista annual expenses for travel, registrations, mileage, accommodation, as well as BCSTA events for events. Provincial Council is also included in with some of those costs. And you can see it in 2016-17, the total cost was $50,000, and the last whole year, 2018-2019, it was $68,000. The biggest reason for that increase, and you can see it in the DCSTA annual expense, was the cost of accommodation over that 3-year period has gone up significantly, and the events themselves have also almost stretched from a 2-day event for some of them into some trustees requiring 4 nights. And so there's no single item, it was just sort of a pretty significant increase in inflationary costs for the same events. Now for the benefits, I did list a number of benefits that actually came from the BCSTA website. However, I would probably, it's probably more proper for the trustees, for you yourselves to come up with the benefits of the membership. But I do have some things listed there. Of course, I think the ones to support that I know that I deal with on a somewhat regular basis, once a year, once every couple of years, is some of the legal support. So they do have an on-staff lawyer, and we do and can rely on them for legal advice to protect the board. And that's not even to protect the district, it's to protect the board. And that legal services also does a lot of policy development that comes out to school districts, and ultimately it's sent to the board, but ultimately it is policy work that supports the district. One other item that wasn't really in their benefits, but it is significant, is trustee orientation. So they do talk about professional development. It's a very broad description for the events that they have. They have these 2 provincial events and 2 zone events, but every 4 years upon election of a new board, they have a trustee academy for sessions for new trustees, as well as just probably revisiting some topics for returning trustees.
Thank you for your report. Any questions? Hearing none, we shall move forward to student enrollment. Reported by Dr. Morrow.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Franklin. Thinking back since the onset of COVID and the preparation of this year's budget, there was some concern around this presentation to the board tonight around what our actual final enrollment numbers are. So I'm just going to cut right to the chase with what is actually relatively good news. So in the spring, we forecasted student enrollment to be 5,493 students. As of our September 30th count, we have 5,455 students. So it's an estimated preliminary drop of 38 students, or 38 FTEs, how we refer to that. I say estimated just because there are still some final adjustments that will be made as we clarify potentially a dual enrolled student, a student enrolled in more than one district, and other fine tuning of that. So there is still some final adjustments to be made. I do want to point out and recognize the tremendous effort of our clerical staff this year to prepare for the data for submission to the ministry with their new student information system. So lots of learning in the midst of everything else this year. So there's still some final adjustments there. I want to speak just briefly about international. Our international program last year had just under 60 FTE. We anticipated a similar, if not a slight increase in that FTE this year. That's not included in the overall enrollment numbers, which is why I'm addressing it separately. This year, at this moment, we have just over 7 FTE, so you can see that there's been a tremendous drop in international student enrollment, which is to be expected when, and the good news about international is that after many months of waiting, international students are now able to enter Canada as of today, if they're going to a dedicated learning institution or a designated learning institution. So we do anticipate seeing a slow return of international students to our program even throughout this year, but clearly we are short the expected and anticipated student enrollment. What that means is we've been very fortunate as a district, and the board's been very prudent about the usage of international funds. It's a self-funded program, and international funds have never been integrated into operational budgets. What we do provide through international funding is a full-time teacher at both Carey High and Timberline. Even though the enrollment has obviously had a significant reduction, we have not reduced that staffing this year. The surplus that's been accumulated because we have not used excess funds that international has generated to supplement the operational budget. We're able to sustain the international program this year and hopefully long enough to see a return to more substantial revenues. So it is a program in flux, and we're fortunate as we listen to other districts who also have experienced the same percentage drop with their international budgets integrated into their operational. It's much different in terms of some of the consequences to that. I want to give the board also some update to some of the enrollment around eBlend and some of the transition that we've experienced there. It was mentioned earlier that eBlend is now one of our larger schools, and so I want to just share the elementary middle numbers as well as a star and asterisk to our secondary numbers around enrollment with our eBlend program. As of September 25th in elementary school, we had 276 students enrolled in our eHub program, which is the site-based eBlend program, but we call it eHub, or it's connected to the school directly. That number has, and we've seen that not significant, but a steady trickle of students out of eBlend as people have become more confident in the protocols in school and an increased sense of safety. We've seen that number reduced as of today to 253 elementary students in our eBlend program. And I want to again just commend the board around or celebrate the fact that the additional hiring of eBlend teachers was done with the federal funding instead of collapsing those spaces. So there's still room for those students to return in our schools. So that's been very positive. Middle school, we've seen a small decrease from the start of September from 159 to 151 students. So very, very steady. In our secondary school, we saw 123 students, and I just wanted this asterisk to the eBlend piece in secondary. It's complicated because students in secondary schools have traditionally within their timetable, even a student that attends school full-time may take an online course as one of their options. So in September, we had 123 students between both Carey High and Timberline taking an online course. We've seen a significant increase in the second 5-week, which we've just started, which is 216. So we've seen a high increase in the second 5-week course. Those are some of the stats. So at this time, we have approximately 600 students in our eBlend program. So again, the positive piece about our eBlend programs is that those students who do not yet feel safe to return to school are still experiencing schooling. It's different, obviously, than our face-to-face programming, and I, again, don't believe there's any replication to that face-to-face programming, but we're working as a district to ensure that schools have meaningfully connected with those students and that they have a meaningful program that's being provided. And so the great news is, although there is a small drop in enrollment, that the preliminary estimate is that it's just under 40 students.
Thank you. Questions? Okay.
Just on a clarification for the secondary increase in numbers. So what you're saying is, you know, there is in the second 8th, we're seeing more students taking 2 courses at a time.
No, we're seeing students enrolled instead of Physics 11 in class, they might be in Physics 11 online. So that doesn't mean they're necessarily a full-time online student, but they're taking an online course in the second rotation.
Would a student be able to do 2 courses at a time? Like, would they be able to take Physics 11 and then English 11
That's
online?
still occurring, yes.
Okay. Daryl.
Yeah, I was wondering, the 2 teachers, where are we utilizing those 2 teachers that are left from the international program?
So when the schools in the spring, when secondary schools receive their staffing, they assign the number of courses based on that staffing. So in order to pull a international teacher or a 1.0 staffing assigned by international from a school, they would have to reduce their course offerings by 7 blocks. So it's incredibly complex work, and it really disrupts all of the student schedules. So those 2 international teachers are still teaching, and they're teaching full-time with full classes.
Just
Yes.
about that, the cost to provide that services is coming from a surplus that the international had saved basically from last year. So even with 0 revenues coming in this year, there still is a reserve surplus that will be drawn down to support the services and the full-time coordinators of these teachers. So it still will not dip into, impact.
Great. So last meeting we had a presentation by Dave Harper, president of the CRDTA, asking the board to write a letter to the ministry asking that we cancel FSA forever. We have a commentary by Dr. Murrow.
So the commentary is really a 30,000-foot view of the role and purpose and utility of the Foundation Skills Assessment, which we frequently refer to as the FSA. So the FSA is an annual assessment that measures students' progress in reading, writing, and numeracy skills. So the FSA is the first time a student writes a provincial assessment. The provincial assessments take place in both grades 4 and grade 7. And in each grade, the assessments take approximately 4.5 hours of time to administer. There has been recognition this year that there's unique circumstances facing schools, and so the FSA, which is typically administered, actually would be administering it right now, has been delayed until January 18th and will take place between January 18th and February 26th of this next year. That was intended by the ministry to provide schools with more time to prepare for the administration of those assessments. So there's three basic purposes, large purposes that are targeted through the FSAs. The first is to provide system level information on student performance. The second purpose of the FSA is to provide districts and schools with information on student performance. And thirdly, the FSA is to help provide parents with a snapshot of how their child is doing in reading, writing, and numeracy. The FSA can be purposeful in helping to answer questions such as, is student achievement in school district 72 improving over time? Or are there trends in student performance at the school, district, and provincial levels? While the test is considered mandatory for students, there is a narrow list of exemptions that the ministry considers as optional, and for those students to participate. And in these situations, parents are able to exclude their children from participation in FSA. When any parent indicates that they do not want their child to participate in the FSA, the school principal will follow up with the parents to ensure that they understand the purpose and nature of the assessment. Ultimately, parents can make a decision, but we encourage in our district to have all children participate because high rates of participation result in more accurate and useful data. The FSA is a snapshot, whereas classroom assessment takes place over an extended period of time. When considering individual student results, it should only be used as a point of triangulation with the ongoing and professional assessment of the classroom teacher. And I do want to conclude this very brief overview by acknowledging that over the years, there have been significant concerns expressed over how that data is used by external parties to rank schools. In our district, School District 72, we use the data to help guide student achievement efforts and do not believe that the ranking of schools is purposeful, productive, accurate, or advisable based on FSA results.
Okay, any comments or questions? Joyce?
I acknowledge that there's a very good and useful purpose for FSA. I don't know how we counter, though, the damage that is often done when that information is used by third parties to be able to distort the whole discussion about education and ranking and success in school districts. And we've talked about that for years, but we don't ever seem to make any headway on how to shut the Fraser Institute up. How do we do that?
I hope you weren't asking me that question.
Subtle, Joyce.
Yes, the problem I have sometimes with the exam is that you're led to believe by some people that it doesn't count. It doesn't count towards a grade, and so some people place little or no importance on the exam, and yet if you were to go to a private school, they would say it's very important because they want to, with the Fraser Institute, be placed or ranked up in a higher level. And I know that we send all of our children to, if we can, for the exam, but I think there has to be a message that it really does count, because we do need a clear snapshot of where we are, where we're going, and what we're doing. And until we can get past this political battle back and forth with this exam, the data that we're collecting here may not be that accurate. And so I don't know what we can do about that, but just talking about it like this is a good venue to say we would like the exam, we would like our students to do their best, because it does count towards a whole number of things. How governments spend their money in various areas, in various regions. I know if there are problems, they can identify it through a long-term study on how students are doing. And so I don't have a solution, but I would be glad to hear anybody else's.
John Kerr, then Kat Eddy.
I think it's incorrect to refer to it as an exam. It's more assessment. And because there's no marks given, no rankings given to students. It's just an assessment to determine where they are in their, I guess, their educational journey. But for the system, for us, we're spending tens of millions of dollars on an education system. We need to understand where our students are so that we can direct that money in a way that benefits our students the most. If we don't have enough students participating, we don't have an accurate picture. So we don't have the information that we need to direct the funds to where it needs to go, because we all know that funding is a limited resource and we need to use it as efficiently as we can. As Joyce has said, it has been abused by the Fraser Institute, but I think there have been moves to maybe control where that information goes, where we go to individual districts, to schools, and even have a report to parents on where their children are in that assessment. So it has been made out to be something that, to me, seems to be far more threatening than it ever needs to be. It shouldn't be something that's threatening or stressful. It should just be a normal part of what goes on. And this is, we need to know where each student is in reading, in writing, and math. And we need to know if there are trends that information tells us. And if we don't have a valid sample of students, we don't have the information that we absolutely need to direct the money that we're spending in the most efficient way.
So please pardon my ignorance about the FSA, but is there a risk of private institutions and potentially public institutions teaching to the assessment, looking to score a higher, not saying that that should happen, but could it happen that a private institution or a public institution could teach to the assessment in order to score a higher rating or ranking at the Fraser Institute to attract more families?
I would say it's possible. I think one of the pieces that is problematic simply just by the ranking of schools is that we do have people making judgments based on that ranking. And so it is possible that particularly schools that are driven by recruitment efforts to sustain funding may target that. That's certainly not the case here.
No, I wouldn't think so, but just wondering if it's...
I can talk a little bit about that later after Darryl.
It would just be nice to see the politics removed from it. And it is just an assessment, like you say, John. And use it for good information rather than some kind of political wedge between communities and whipsawing schools against each other. We just want the best for our kids. I'd like to see the assessment simple, the information stay within the district. It be utilized on a provincial level as well, but we don't need to have all this information out there published. It serves no purpose as far as I'm concerned.
So if I may just turn the chair over to Mr. Kerr, so I can make my comments. So in my career as an educator, I did a lot of work on the FSA tests. I was a section head for the writing. I was hired by the Ministry of Education to develop baseline papers to determine how to grade the papers. I was a section head and was in charge of over the years, several hundred markers, where I was the final judge as to how to mark the papers. And also, I was the one who I worked with other teachers to develop the anchor papers and say, well, this is a paper that shows something that exceeds expectations, and this one fully meets expectations. One of the things that's not really widely known, I think, about the FSA is that they are based on the BC performance standards. And these are rubrics which use language to determine and identify aspects of learning and be able to tell you whether they are within expectations or below expectations. BC performance standards are world-class, and people and jurisdictions throughout the world look to BC's rubrics to help them describe achievement. These rubrics were not written by the government. They were written by teachers, members of the BCTF. And the exams themselves, or assessments, like all of them, were largely written by BC teachers. Also, many principals and vice principals have worked on those as well. One of the things that has been critical about the FSA is how it has informed us of the achievement of Indigenous students and how they have compared and need for greater funding and attention. Our second platform of our strategic plan is hugely important by the FSA. But I would agree with Mr. Harper that the results of the FSA are corrupted and misinterpreted. When I marked papers, we would come across batches of papers from the same school, and they all had the same answers. Well, obviously, these were discovered, and there was cheating, and occasionally these came from private schools. That answers your question. Now, if I was to offer a suggestion to the government, it would be that the individual results be shared with the individual parents. Because it's one of the only times when, you get this large sample with a pretty high level of validity and reliability that helps parents understand where their kids are vis-a-vis the performance standards. So it is possible, it would be possible, and this would be a great thing for every student to achieve a level of exceeding expectations. So it throws out the normal curve and says, this is what it looks like to achieve at the highest level. And the performance standards and the FSA helps us to identify those things and help us work with kids, at least 11 years old when I was a teacher, on how they can improve. I would think that so I would say, if I was to make a suggestion to the government, it would be that the individual results be shared with individual parents, and that district results be shared with the district, so that the district has an idea of where it was in terms of literacy, numeracy, reading, writing, arithmetic. It's unfortunate that the Fraser Institute perverts this information, corrupts it, twists it, and uses it for their nefarious right-wing agenda. But when I was growing up, my mom would tell me, Richard, consider the source. Somebody tells you something, consider who they are and what they're trying to do, what they're trying to accomplish. So we live in a free country. People can organize things like the Fraser Institute, right-wing think tank if they want, and they have the right to say what they want to say. But let's all just consider the source when we see what the Fraser Institute has to say and what are they trying to get? Promotion of private schools. And in conclusion, the Foundation Skills Assessment provides parents and school districts with important information about how well students are progressing. In the foundational skills of reading, writing, and arithmetic, it allows us to triangulate the data provided by classroom teachers and our own district tests. It's known in the assessment world that you need to triangulate the data. So you've got the teacher's assessment, you've got the district assessment, and you've got the provincial assessment. And by triangulating that data, it helps us to have a really clear picture of where we're going. So I would encourage parents out there to allow their children to take this assessment. It's 4.5 hours. You'll get some really good information back on how well your child is doing in relation to the BC performance standards. And
I think Trustee McMahon had a question of you, so I'm going to give Chairman.
okay, go ahead.
Did you have a question? For
Well, maybe it's for Chairman Franklin or anyone else who might answer it. In the years that I have been involved with the Board of Education for Campbell River, there has been an accusation or an acknowledgement that the Fraser Institute has perverted a lot of the important work that you allude to or you describe in terms of what the FSA could do for us. And there's been a lot of discussion both by the teachers and by parents and by school trustees about how to move away from that system that allows that kind of perversion. And I'm wondering, have we made any headway in terms of cutting off the ability of third parties to utilize the information? Have we done anything toward making this information private to school districts in order that we can better use it with some confidence and trust within families and our community?
I believe that there should be some movement towards what you're talking about. And the reason is that confidentiality of student results is important. And some of the schools that are reported on or ranked by the Fraser Institute are extremely small. They're very small. But they're included. And if there's only 5 students in grade 4, and you're identifying the students provincially in a ranking system, which I believe compromises the confidentiality of the student. So, as I said, if I was to advise the government, the results would go to parents and they'd go to the districts, but that would be it.
Can we not advise the government to do that?
I'll take the chair back. Yes, you could. You could make a motion that advises the board, that advises the province of your concerns. We do have a communications committee, an excellent communications committee that writes letters on our behalf that goes well beyond the motion but explores the topic.
Okay, I would like to move that our communications committee create a letter for us that would demonstrate our concern around the use of FSA results and recommend that they be restricted to the confidentiality of school districts.
Okay, seconder? Darrell Haig. Okay, so Joyce, you are the mover, and Carol is the seconder. You may begin the debate.
Well, I think it's all been said. I think that, as I said, we've talked for the years that I've been involved in the board on our concerns around how this information is used and with the deterioration of the ability to use the assessment has grown over the years because of people's lack of confidence in how it's being used and the controversy that's thrown up around it. I think it's not something that's unknown to our Ministry of Education, and I think it's time they made some move to remedy.
Carol Hagan.
We're going to do something in the district. It should have a good, strong purpose other than being served to other people to use it however they want. And if it comes back to us and it goes back to the individual parents, I think it has a real purpose. So yes, I think it's important.
Okay, John Kerr, and then Kat.
One of the options that we have through our association is to propose a motion with rationale and submit it for discussion at the annual general meeting in April. That may be something that we may wish to think about and to do as well.
Yeah, Eddie.
Trustee Kerr just stole my thunder. I agree, John, I agree.
My apologies.
Okay. To close debate, Trustee McMahon.
I thought maybe there might have been something about FS. Okay. No, I think I've said what I need to say. I think you have said what we need to say.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. And the motion is carried. Okay, so now we're going to move to number 13, the VISTA meeting.
Okay, that's kind of a combination I think we're gonna have to have between John and I. We attended the virtual VISTA meeting. I unfortunately had an awful lot of trouble getting connected to it, so I caught the very end of the presentation that was created, so I'll ask John to speak to that.
Yeah, the first hour of the meeting was a presentation, and the name of the presenter is Casey. He's a young, not really that young, but he's a person who was an entertainer. He's a black man who was an entertainer in Toronto. He had different programs on television in Toronto and stuff, and he ended up getting into the field of discussing or talking about anti-black racism. It is apparently a real issue in places like Halifax, which have a large black population, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, and other areas as well as smaller places. It's not just restricted to large places. It's everywhere. And he did a presentation on how insidious it was, and then also about ways that it can be dealt with. I don't have the presentation here. I think it would be worthwhile for us to get the information from the BC or VISTA. But one of the things that is tied, one of the outcomes, I guess, that's tied in with this may not be directly related to his presentation, is that there's a resolution that's going to the Provincial Council. I think it's next week. That there's a motion for the province to take action on anti-black racism, including investigating root structural causes of anti-black racism in the education system, developing and implementing mandatory anti-racism education for staff and students alike. And I don't think the anti-racism education is restricted only to anti-black. there's a wide range of racism and this information to be applied to. And then create a database to keep track of incidents of racism in BC schools against students and staff. Again, that's not specific to anti-Black racism. And then adding to our history curriculum, in K-12 curriculum, the elements of Canadian Black history. So that's one of the outcomes of it. But I think it's starting to make boards aware of the strong presence of anti-Black racism and also other racism as well, and that we need to start looking at taking measures to deal with them. I don't know if there's anything more you wanted to add from the end of the presentation.
No, as I said, I just caught the end of it, and I think his comments were largely based on working to embrace cultures of diversity and curiosity and wonder within our districts in order to create worlds where we can address the issues that arise around racism, whether they're Black racism or, we've got the internment camps from World War II, we've got the Chinese head tax, we've got the Tiramisu that was not allowed to come ashore. I mean, we have a history of unfortunate actions that we have taken against people solely based on their culture or their skin color. And I think we need to embed all of those in our way of teaching children about how to move forward, not simply identify Black as being, we have a history of residentials. I mean, we go on, and we've got lots of territory to cover. So I appreciated the last comments he made around embracing a culture of more generosity and wonder and curiosity and acceptance of people who may be different than ourselves. And then we moved on to the business part of the meeting. There was a lot of territory covered there too. It seemed that there were a number of issues that kind of rose to the surface. The Professional Learning Committee is looking at ways in which they can create opportunities for members of VISTA to get together and learn. They talked about how we could work on strategies to implement the TRC. They talked about how we look at addressing the issues that are unique to rural education. Mental health is huge. They talked about the need to expand the Foundry, and we were very lucky that our community was one of the few communities that were able to create a pilot kind of the whole Foundry notion. So they talked about the challenges related to COVID funding and lack of COVID funding and how capital was being diverted from maintenance to try and cover some of the gaps that were being created through the challenges of COVID. And they talked about recruitment teachers and how to meet the challenges of trying to find enough teachers in order to meet the challenges once again of some of the idiosyncrasies that have arisen around our COVID challenges. It seemed that in the reports that all of the districts on the island gave, most of the districts had a wee bump, I think, in their enrollment. However, there was, a growth in the number of students who chose eBlend, although there was, I think, pretty much a return of maybe 80 in some districts and as high as the low 90% in terms of those that chose to return to the classroom, particularly in elementary school. What else? What else, John? I think those are the points that come to mind.
And I think even just recently, Port Alberni has had a real issue. They're now looking for people to get letters of permission or people who, if you call them persons, they didn't call them teachers, they call them persons. So because they need something, they're so desperate that they need people who don't have teaching qualifications, don't have letters of permission, but they do have people who in the classroom teach. So they're really facing a crunch, and I think that's one of the things that people are facing around the province.
Yeah. Another thing that comes to mind that you'll be happy to hear, Daryl, is there was a fair bit of conversation around how to embrace outdoor learning and how to incorporate that into the general culture of education and not to create it as being something novel that's a one-time only, let's, solve this problem with this, but begin to blend it into our notion of what education is and how schools can roll out their curriculums in a more eclectic kind of way. I think that's about it, though.
Thank you very much for your report. As you know, ladies and gentlemen, this year of COVID, there will be no formal Remembrance Day ceremonies as we're used to. But just to let you know that our school district has arranged with the Royal Canadian Legion to have wreaths placed on our behalf at the various locations within our school district where there are ceremonies held. And I'd just like to remind everybody, even though there isn't going to be a normal Remembrance Day ceremony, please take the opportunity to purchase and proudly wear a pumpkin in remembrance of those who gave their lives for us. Okay, now we have any questions?
Yeah, question is coming from CRDTA President Dave Harper. Is the communication of the board position going to the minister and the education ministry? Will the provincial stakeholders be copied on the letter and the position of the board on the MSA?
Yes.
That's the only question.
That's the only question? Trustee Hagan. All in favor, say aye.
All right.
Aye.